Coming up on Network Africa. South Africa ends COVID restrictions 2 years after they were initially imposed. Janjaweed militia leader denies Darfur war crimes at the start of an ICC trial. And Rwanda appeal court upholds 25-year jail term sentence for Paul Rusesabagina, also known as the Hotel Rwanda hero. Welcome to the program. I'm Jokia Rogers. We begin today in South Africa, where 750 days after the declaration, the national state of disaster has been lifted. Coronavirus alert levels will also no longer apply in the country, according to President Cyril Ramaphosa in an address to the nation. The national state of disaster was declared 2 years ago in order to empower government to manage the outbreak of COVID-19 in the country. In the past few weeks, South Africa has recorded a drop in the number of cases, number of deaths and infections, but scientists warn that a fifth wave is still likely. South Africa has recorded far more coronavirus cases than any other African country, accounting for almost a third of infections across the continent. It has also officially registered over 100,000 deaths.
So, the end of the national state of disaster is an important milestone in our fight against the pandemic. It is a sign of the progress we have made together and a reminder of what our nation has endured. It is a moment to remember those who have lost their lives and the many people who are still struggling with the effects of disease. It is also a time to pay tribute to the healthcare workers, the police, the soldiers, the volunteers, and other frontline workers for their dedication and their service during the worst times of the pandemic. The end of the national state of disaster is a firm statement of our determination to live our lives and rebuild our country, even as this virus remains in our midst. It should give all of us the confidence to return to the lives we led before the pandemic, with a few simple adjustments to protect those around us. We must, however, remain cautious and ever vigilant. We have learned that this virus is unpredictable and that the situation can change rapidly. Therefore, we are continuing to work with the World Health Organization and other bodies to understand the increase of cases of infection in other parts of the world and to assess the relevant emerging scientific information.
Let's get more on this. Channels TV South Africa correspondent Brian Pogani joins us now from Johannesburg. Brian, good to see you.
Thank you for having me today.
Certainly. So after 2 years, a sigh of relief, is it not, for South Africans, right? What's the reaction to this announcement been like?
Definitely a sigh of relief for many citizens. The end of the national state of disaster finally announced by the President Cyril Ramaphosa. Many citizens are happy that finally things might be getting back to normal. But though there are still a few restrictions here and there, it's a good sign. Political parties welcoming the move as well, because they've been crying foul about the president ending the state of disaster. Churches as well, businesses as well, also saying it's a good sign that the economy will finally open up. So everyone is really positive at the moment. We're expecting to hear what they'll say in the next 30 days with the final discussions. Parliament had ministers at a briefing earlier today, just discussing and enlightening people on what exactly is going to happen in the next 3 days to let us know how the new regulations will continue to stay in place.
Right, so as the president said, the pandemic is not yet over. Some countries still have measures in place, and of course the fears of variants like the dreaded fifth wave. The president, did he announce any plan or safety measures left in place in case of a resurgence?
Well, at the moment, of course, there are a few more regulations which are still in place. The wearing of face masks, especially in closed places, is still in place. Obviously, when you're outdoors in an open space, they're saying you can be free without a mask, but the wearing of masks is still there. Sanitizing as well is still there. So that's some of the regulations which are still there. What the government is planning to do is put some of these regulations in a new National Health Act, which they say they're going to put out in the next 30 days. So most of these regulations, we expect them that they will put in the National Health Act, which will be announced in the next 30 days. So things like your social distancing, if they're going to put it there, the wearing of masks in enclosed places, the limitation of gatherings as well, COVID-19 vaccine certificates if you're going to a show or a football match or to any sporting events. So those are the expectations that we're waiting for, and those are the measures which the president and government are looking at the moment, besides the vaccination drive, which they're continuing to push at the moment.
Talk about the vaccination drive, just as you were speaking there, as part of the Health Acts, perhaps. What's it like at the moment? Are people still taking the COVID-19 shots?
Well, people are still taking the vaccine shots, though the numbers have really decreased on a daily basis. But we've seen over 33.8 million people who the dose has been administered to. This is either fully vaccinated or those who've gotten one shot and waiting for their second shots, booster shots as well, people going for those. There are some who are still skeptical about going to take the vaccines, which is normal in any other country as well. There are some people who are still anti-vaxxers, who are still not sure of the vaccine and saying it's not safe, especially with some of the reports coming out from Pfizer saying that their vaccine is not 100% safe. People take that out of context, not really finding out what exactly is going on. But the vaccine drive has been going on and it continues to go on. And government are still saying that that is the main thing which will help the end and which will reduce the numbers of COVID and us going back to another wave, fifth wave, and more infections in the country.
Right, speaking of vaccinations, last month, a major milestone was reached when scientists in South Africa reproduced Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. But then the focus shifted to the issue of patents. What's the development on that end?
Well, at the moment, Moderna are saying that they're not going to enforce any patents on the hub, which is in Cape Town, the African Biologics Hub, and the World Organization as well. So they're saying that they're not going to enforce any of those patents. At the moment, what we are hearing is that the Moderna vaccine booster shot will be administered to about 10,000 health workers in a trial run, which is called the Shepherd Drive, so which is going to be likely rolled out in the second half of April, which is good news for Moderna and the country as well, that the vaccines are being produced locally and they're going to be administered once this trial run is set, and we'll see more people getting vaccine, and the booster shots, which people are skeptical to go and get, that will be a really good thing for government and for people in general to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Brian, always good to see you. Channels TV's correspondent in South Africa, Brian Pogeni. Let's move on to other stories. An alleged Janjaweed militia leader has pleaded not guilty to dozens of charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity at the first ever trial at the International Criminal Court dealing with Sudan's Darfur conflict of nearly 2 decades ago. Ali Muhammad Ali Abdallah Rahman is accused of overseeing thousands of pro-government Janjaweed fighters responsible for persecution, murder, rape and torture. He has been charged with 31 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. He voluntarily surrendered to the Hague-based court in June 2020 after 13 years on the run. He has denied the charges.
Worked with close. Mr. Abdurrahman, the prosecution says, one of the key senior Janjaweed militia leaders that the government of Sudan relied upon heavily, that they worked with closely. He was, the prosecution say, a willing and knowing participant in crimes, and indeed you'll see, not by way of the destruction of property. What did that have what effect did that have? These morning attacks, when you're woken from your slumber, they were known, their signature movement was riding horses or camels and coming in very frequently in morning attacks, very often at dawn, attacking villages, killing and destroying, and committing some of the crimes that are alleged in the charges before you. It's a case where there is a multiplicity of evidence from different sources that the accused killed, he ordered, he encouraged a full range of crimes, the full range of crimes that are before your honours. He participated and he ordered. It seems his defence is, it's not me. Stay with me and cause me severe nightmares. I try not to think about what happened. Witness after witness saw him, heard him, recognized him. Witness after witness knew Mr. Abdurrahman from before. This is, the prosecution say, a strong case.
A Rwandan appeals court has upheld a 25-year jail sentence for Paul Rusesabagina, rejecting a bid to extend it to life in prison. He was portrayed in the movie Hotel Rwanda as a hero, sheltering hundreds of people during the 1994 genocide. Rusesabagina was convicted in September on 8 terrorism charges related to the activities of an organization opposed to President Paul Kagame's rule. He has denied all charges and refused to take part in the trial. He and his supporters have denounced it as a politically motivated sham. Meanwhile, a section of Rwandan refugees living in Mozambique have begun their return home after nearly 3 decades since they escaped the 1994 genocide. Between April and June 1994, an estimated 800,000 Rwandans were killed. In the space of 100 days, millions others fled to neighboring countries. The Mozambican authorities estimate that there are about 3,000 Rwandan refugees living in the country. Many of them now believe that the situation that forced them to leave their country has changed. The Rwandan government is supporting the refugee reintegration program. The return is voluntary, and some 19 refugees will this week be flown back home. And over in Somalia, the United Nations independent expert Isha Daifan has called for more international support for human rights in the country. Daifan warns the international community not to relent in its support, especially now that stability is becoming a reality. The independent expert was speaking at the end of a week-long visit to Somalia. It was her first since being appointed in May 2020 by the UN Human Rights Council to the post, which involves assessing, monitoring and reporting on the situation of human rights in the Horn of Africa country, with a view towards making recommendations on technical assistance and capacity building.
And without any further ado, again, over to you.
I urge the international community not to relent in its support at this last stage when stability is increasingly becoming a reality in Somalia. I call on the international community to continue its assistance to Somalia towards strengthening the federal and state institutions, in particular the security and justice institutions, as well as the health systems, and addressing the adverse impact of climate change on the full and effective enjoyment of human rights by ensuring access to basic social services, including drinking water, sanitation facilities, housing, health care, education for all children, in particular the girl child. In light of this and the ongoing electoral process, I choose to focus my first visit on economic, social, and cultural rights as they relate to the benchmarks and indicators of my second report to the United Nations Human Rights Council. To this end, the federal government and humanitarian partners are implementing the Emergency Response and Preparedness Plan of 2021 and pre-positioning food items, water and non-food items to support the IDP populations in Baidoa and other areas in the country.
Still to come on the program. Zambia's president goes 8 months without salary, says pay was not his motivation for seeking public office. Welcome back to the program. Somalia's spy agency has warned about an alleged plot by Al-Shabaab militants to attack the president and the prime minister. The National Intelligence and Security Agency, NISA, says it has briefed the nation's leaders on the plot. The agency did not provide further details, but says that it's pursuing everyone involved. The warning comes amid a political crisis in the country due to the much delayed indirect elections. Al-Shabaab has also intensified attacks across Somalia. The group recently attacked a heavily fortified airport complex which houses UN offices, foreign embassies and various diplomatic missions in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. France has called for an international investigation into reports that hundreds of civilians have been killed by government troops and Russian mercenaries in Mali. The EU and the US have made similar calls related to the deaths in the central Moura region. On Friday, Mali's military said it had killed more than 200 Islamist militants during 10 days of fighting in the area. But the West says it's unclear who was killed and by whom. Mali denies mercenaries from Russia's Wagner Group are helping it fight an Islamist insurgency. Now, Zambia's President Hakainde, the Zambian Minister of Finance has disclosed that Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema has served the last 8 months without a paycheck. The ministry says that the president has foregone wages in his interest to serve the public. President Hichilema, who was elected into office last August, says a salary was not his motivation for seeking public office. He has also maintained his position that he does not want to be given thousands of titles such as His Excellency, but that he would rather be addressed as Mr. President. The 59-year-old, an economist and businessman, became president after a 15-year haul in the opposition, defeating then-President Edgar Lungu by more than 1 million votes. UN scientists have laid out a plan that they believe could help people avoid the worst impacts of rising temperatures. The report by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, essentially calls for a revolution in how we produce energy and power our world. To avoid very dangerous warming, carbon emissions need to peak within 3 years and fall rapidly thereafter. The report follows a 2-week approval session that started on March the 21st. Our correspondent, Ayola Kassim, has more.
Delays and disagreements on Sunday pushed the release, originally scheduled for the early hours of Monday, till much later in the day.
Over and over and over again, suggestions for amendments that cover, their peculiar economic interests. And that is part of the reason why we delayed. But also a lot of it was just simply that countries have taken deep interest in climate change, and they really want to ensure that the evidence that we're presenting is balanced and robust.
The third in the series of findings provides the most recent scientific knowledge on mitigation, but it also shows that between 2010 and 2019, the world saw average global greenhouse gas emissions at their highest levels in human history. And the result is a catastrophe already being experienced across the world. Reaction from the United Nations Secretary General was swift and fiery.
We are on a pathway to global warming of more than double the 1.5-degree limit agreed in Paris. Some government and business leaders are saying one thing but doing another. Simply put, they are lying. And the results will be catastrophic.
The next few years are critical, says the IPCC. Reducing temperature increases to within 1.5 degrees Celsius requires global greenhouse gas emissions to peak before 2025 at the latest and be reduced by 43% by 2030. At the same time, methane would also need to be reduced by about 1/3.
It could have been higher if we had not taken action. And the challenge now is really to step up the pace of that action. We have the tools, we have the regulations, we have the policies. We need to make them tighter and we need to spread them more widely in order to make changes.
To change the current course means spending more money on renewables and shun subsidies for fossil fuel, a move that will hurt countries like Nigeria badly.
Although emissions have continued to rise over the past decade, there has also been massive investment in renewable resources around the world, and the transition is well underway. And so Nigeria really needs to get its act together in order to participate effectively in the green transition. Otherwise, it will be left behind.
The scientists say the evidence is clear and we all see it daily. The time for action, they say, is now. And this will require changes in energy production, industry, consumption, transport, and our attitude towards nature. Ayola Kasim, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, around 99% of the global population breathe air that exceeds World Health Organization's air quality limits, with people in low-income and middle-income countries being most exposed to pollution. That's Europe.
Based on the monitored settlement, air quality is the poorest in specific regions like the Eastern Mediterranean region, the Southeast Asian region, and also Africa. An interesting pattern that we have seen when we were comparing the regional differences between particulate matter and NO2 was that while for particulate matter we know that some regions are really impacted by air pollution like the one I just mentioned, and there has been also a huge difference between high-income countries versus low- and middle-income countries for particulate matter. For NO2, the pattern is a little bit different in the sense that we see much less difference between low-middle-income countries and high-income countries. Most of the 7 million deaths, they come from low- and middle-income countries. Indeed, they do. It doesn't mean that in the high-income countries are not impacted. When we are using mortality to calculate the impact of air pollution on health, however, we are very much aware that you should actually count for morbidity. I mean, all the disease that it creates, all the absenteeism, the lack of productivity. There are a lot of costs associated with air pollution, which is not necessarily captured in the death. I mean, the death is the ultimate, it's the worst, but you have a lot of people who actually suffer from air pollution without dying from it.
The bad news is that when we look at all of these data, still what the data is telling us that a big proportion, almost 100% of the global population is still breathing air that exceed the standards recommended by the World Health Organization.
We close in Central Africa. Every year, park rangers search the beaches of the Democratic Republic of Congo's vanishing coastline for turtle nests, bringing the eggs to a hatching center where they are incubated for 8 weeks. Rising sea levels and erosion have consumed almost a quarter of the turtles' nesting grounds. Now, a new concern is emerging in the form of a port, which the government says will bring jobs and lower the cost of imports. But rangers worry it'll further endanger the turtles.
Towards the end of the year, Christian Ndombe and other park rangers scour the beaches of Democratic Republic of Congo's vanishing coastline for turtle nests, bringing the eggs to a hatching center where they're incubated for 8 weeks.
So with this method, it increases the number of turtles on the beach. We will also have to see elsewhere in other countries in the years to come. We can even see that the baby turtles that we have today should come back again as soon as they are adults to take their eggs on our beach.
Initial success is turning to despair, however, as rising sea levels and a resulting erosion consume almost a quarter of the turtles' nesting grounds in recent years.
Erosion often eliminates the coastline. We have a lot of threats from erosion, and people, especially fishermen, are looking for turtles who look a lot for turtles.
Now, a new threat is emerging in the form of a port, which the government says will bring jobs and lower the cost of imports, but that rangers worry will further constrict the dry, sandy spaces above the tide line where turtles dig their nests. On a sandy spit a few kilometers down the coast, where the vast Congo River spews into the Atlantic Ocean, President Felix Tshisekedi laid the foundation stone for a $1.2 billion deepwater port on January 31st. On completion in 2025, Banana Port will be able to handle almost 500,000 containers per year, according to the project developer, Dubai's port giant DP World. The cost of sending goods from China to Congo's capital Kinshasa via Banana Port instead will result in a saving of 21%. Authorities at the Congolese Institute for Nature Conservation, the government agency that manages Congo's national parks through its rangers, said its experts were not properly consulted by the developers.
As far as I know, there is no study about environmental and social impact. We need to see these studies. Until now, we don't have them. And about this kind of project of very big infrastructure, what is very important at the very beginning of the project is to implement inside the promoter of the project a special unit that will follow the environmental and social indicators. This is very important. And as far as I know, in the project of the port in Banana, until now this unit doesn't exist.
Banana Port will be built on the fringe of Congo's Mangrove Marine Park, a nature reserve protected by national and international regulations.
That's Network Africa today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.